growing weary of running from room to room, practicing one-tooth insurance-driven dentistry? Then stay tuned for the latest episode of The Lionhearted, where Dr. Stephen Rasner will hand you the blueprint for what many call the gold standard of general practice dentistry.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Steve Rasner, and welcome to The Lionhearted Dentist. Last week I was talking about the importance of being a boss when you need to be the boss. And I just want to follow that up with saying to you that I realize that's not intuitive to all of our different personalities, but it's an important part of long-term success. And, go back and listen to that. I wouldn't have included it if I didn't think it was important, because what happens when you're not the boss? Unless you have an office manager that can cover that function for you very effectively, then you need to be the boss. And I think most of us, I have a tremendous office manager, but when it comes to a host of different issues, it has to be me. And so that's all I want to say about that. Go back and listen. Reach out to me if you're not clear on what I'm trying to tell you, what you need to do at times, or what I would do. Listen, I had an epiphany, and the epiphany is that we got 8 weeks left. I can't believe I'm saying that to you in 2020. And I know for most of us, the quick reaction to that is, thank God. COVID and the election craziness here in the United States and all the things that have made this, the murder hornets have made this a year that most of us want to see behind us. But let's get serious for a minute. We have 8 weeks left of this year. This is exactly when you should be thinking about, how do I finish this year strong? And what are my plans, my goals, and my direction for 2021? Because it's going to pop up right in front of you before you have time to breathe. And that's what this podcast, and perhaps one to follow, are going to be dedicated to. What should you be doing right now, no matter what else is going on in your professional life? And before I address that, let me say to you that when you do things like this, when you do a podcast, when you get advice to anyone, it's important to recognize that you recognize that I understand that we're not all in the same boat. I said this to you back in March when the pandemic came upon us. Isn't it true that how your reaction to the pandemic had a lot to do where you were at with your career? If you were just starting, it had highly different consequences than if you're on the tail end of your career. Maybe you didn't want to dig down deep and do all the things that you need to do. So the truth is that exact sentiment is true when I talk to you about, do you even care right now? Some of you are probably so exhausted that you don't even want to think about ratcheting down and gearing up, taking the energy, quite honestly, that's required to move into 2021 with success. And if you're listening to this, I have to think the people that are tuned into this, whether you're just started a practice in the last 3 years, whether you're an associate and you're looking forward to breaking out on your own soon, or doing something that would make your career more fulfilling, or if you're like me, I'm well into a career, but the way I look at it, I don't want to just have my practice and what I have built and spent my life doing deteriorate into a so-so practice in my community. If I'm out there doing it just like an athlete, I want to be the best I can be. So yes, from my point of view, right now, thinking about what you should be doing going forward is tantamount or paramount actually in your agenda. And I've taken some notes to share with you before I came on today. But the first thing to do is when you do think about this, it shouldn't be in the office. Listen, man, I know there's a lot of arguments that can be made that don't take your practice home with you on the weekends when you're with your family and your wife and your husband. And I understand the merit of that, but how much time that you are able to spend pleasurably with your family, going on vacations, spending peaceful time coaching your children's sports team, has everything to do with how effective you are in the office. So yeah, I think it's worth it to take clarity of time, clarity of a moment when you can really think. You're telling me you can execute that inside your office? I don't think so. Most of us can't do that. So these thoughts I'm telling you to consider right now, you need to be considering while you're in clear time, which it doesn't take that long to think about it. And even if it does, the outcome or the return is well worth it. You better believe that there was a time. Right now I'm speaking to probably all of you, but certainly those of you that are coming out of dental school, that are in an associateship, that are in the first 10 years of a practice, or if you're further and you're not fulfilled, you're not satisfied, you better believe I spent incredible time, and there's many books probably behind me on goal setting and how to really goal set and how to achieve those goals. This was the time of the year that I was planning on what I would be doing the following year. When I say that to you, I mean, I used to break it down. Literally, I would write it down. This goes all the way back before we had computers. I'm not kidding. I would have all these yearly planners that I would subscribe in intently as to what my personal goals were, what were my educational, clinical accomplishments I wanted to achieve in the coming year. You know, what courses I would take, in other words. What about my team? What about my staff? So the first thing I'm going to remind you is that this needs to be done someplace in your life where you can really think about it. And I would break it up into what are my goals within my organization that I have. Those of you in an associateship, maybe your goal would be to ask more from whoever the boss is and the manager of that office. Don't become complacent, not even for a year. You need to always be growing. Remember something. When I do these with you, I'm trying to give you some semblance of a blueprint for how I got to this position I'm in professionally. And the major criteria that I would look back at where am I at in my career is the word you keep hearing me use in this podcast so far, and that's fulfillment, like happy with where I'm at in my career. So for me, by the way, personally, I might write down I want to publish 2 articles this year. I did that for years. And what journal I wanted to try to be in and what courses I would take. So let's break it down. Let's keep it with you right now. The first thing is, where does your organization stand? Like, where are you with respect to different components that make the organization? So, for example, of course, financially. I mean this when I say this to you. Do you even know where you really stand? I bet some of you don't know. I'm positive you don't know. And let me explain. Do you know how profitable your hygiene department is, for example? How would you know? Unless you looked at the numbers. And do you trust those numbers? What parameters, what numbers are you even looking at? A few years back, it wasn't that I didn't trust the numbers that I was being given by the comptroller of my office. He's been with me a long time, and I think he does an excellent job. But I didn't care. I wanted to hear somebody outside of my office who had no agenda to tell me how my numbers stood up. And this is what I had this person do against similar practices. So in my case, it wouldn't be fair to compare me to a practice that does $500,000 a year or $10 million a year. So I had this virtual bookkeeper, this virtual accountant, look at my numbers compared against a similar practice and also the industry standard. So obviously the person that I've used is very connected to the dental industry and knows these things. And I've offered, by the way, to give you her contact if you wanted to explore using her. She doesn't care, and I make nothing off this, so please, there's no agenda here except to help you. Let's think about that for a minute. Do you know where you stand, how profitable the way you run your hygiene department, for example, is? Let's take it a step further. If you have an associate, do you know how that's working out? I mean, do you really know? When you pay your associate, you pay the supplies, your portion of the lab, the assistant that works for that associate. Do you know the bottom line to you? Is that worth it? How about if you had a satellite office? Many of you listening have satellite offices. So, are you familiar with the bottom line of the satellite office? These are things that I literally do, not just at the end of the year, but multiple times a year. And it's worth it to me to pay someone to just give me that information. There's no way I'm going to take the time personally to investigate all this and actually do the calculations and do the research. I'm not doing that. It's well worth it for me to delegate that to somebody, and that somebody's outside my organization. So the first thing I would look at, I mean, unless you're a non-profit organization, you have to look at the numbers. How else would you know if you're paying your associate enough or too much, or if it's even a doable relationship in your present organization? So, or those of you that have a specialist come in, very, very relevant point. I know many of you have an endodontist come in. Many of you have other specialists come in. Is that working out for you? Do you know whether it's working out? That's one component I want you to look at. The next one would be your team. Yep. I would literally take each member of my team and I would not only assess what I thought their contributions were, how they're doing in the organization, but I would meet with them, or I'd have my office manager meet with them. I'm stone cold honest. I did those things for many, many years. And I still do some of them to a degree. So I'm just being honest with you. You know, I've been in this 40 years. The truth is, some years I do what I'm telling you right now, and sometimes I don't. But for many of my 40 years, probably 30 plus, this was automatic in my going from this time of the year to the next. So I look at my finances. Where are we at? If it's not good, I have to figure out why it's not good. Then I would look at my team. And you know, when I say that to you, we all know that it's very easy to overlook a poor performance or a change of performance, which happens in a career, of one of our team members for whatever reasons. Their lives may have changed, their situation may have changed. You know, maybe they want out of your organization and they're on automatic pilot at this point. Maybe they want out of dentistry for all you know. Seriously, how would you know that unless you took the time? And it's very easy to overlook it because change requires change. And it's not fun to get a new hygienist and look for that position, especially in a pandemic world that we live in, or a new assistant. I'm in that situation right now, by the way. I literally am with one of my team members. So, again, I have to repeat what I said earlier in this podcast is don't become complacent. And the next big question, which leads right into your 2021 goal setting, that you need to record all this stuff, would be, well, what do we need to make them better? What would make your team better, and how would that impact your daily professional life? Man, this isn't pie in the sky. If you think you can just go in, take a new course on something, and not pay attention to the things I'm talking about, you're going to be in for a letdown at some point, and it's going to be very disappointing because most of us are willing to work on our personal skills in our profession. And look, I have to say to you that I'm a CE junkie. You know that I encourage you to be a CE junkie. And one of the benefits of doing such is that when you're out in the world, outside of your office, taking courses with like-minded people that care. Not everybody takes courses. Don't you know that many of your colleagues are just going through the motions, and they take as much online as they can possibly do, not only because it's cheaper, because it just fulfills your state requirement. They could care less about really getting better. And I'm sorry if that's harsh, but it's very true. But when you're out there at a course, you can't help at lunchtime or at some moment. It always happened to me that you hear how other people are doing things. That's one of the biggest Achilles heel of what we do as dentists, because it's so easy for us to be isolationist, to go for years and not have communication as to how our colleagues might handle this or that. Oh my God, I used to get on the phone monthly with a number of other dentists, and we would brainstorm how to make our practices better. This didn't all happen by accident, guys. I put a lot of time into it. And there's sometimes I look back and say, was it worth it? Did I have to do all that I did? I mean, I have so many people in my life I know that if it just comes down to the bottom line dollar, are worth multiples of what I'm worth in terms of net, in terms of assets. Even in dentistry, there's many like that. But you can make a very handsome living even doing an average job. That was always very rewarding to me, just feeling I was doing this right. And I know that's the case with many of you listening, or you wouldn't be listening to me. You'd be listening to how to prep a crown in 30 seconds, or how to produce more, or this or that. And you can do both as a Lionhearted dentist, quite honestly. You're not going to make $10 million a year doing this, but you can make a lot of money. And so I don't know how else to communicate to you that, yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's the stuff that I'm talking about right here in this podcast. So what would make them better? And I can just tell you the number one things I've done over the years in terms of training my team. And quite honestly, I know I'm going to be doing it again in 2021. So when it came to my office at this stage of my career, especially, documentation, accurate documentation is critical to me. Let me ask you, how would you know if you don't get out there, if you don't investigate, you don't Google it, what would be the standard of care of accurate, thorough documentation of all the things that take place in your office? Hygiene. Is everybody recording periodontal probings, attached gingiva, bleeding upon probings, all the things that would be serious data if you were ever sued, and even if you were never sued? Isn't that the way you want to be? Isn't that part of so documentation, which is certainly not sexy, I get it, is a big part of what I want my team to be. And I would implore you to look into that, better documentation skills in 2021. Right along that list, for me, would be two other things. And this would include my dental assistants as well. And that would be training them to have red flags and training them daily to look at medical histories or changes in medical histories. Look, you and I know you can go years. It's easy to fall into a rut with a patient and maybe not even look at the medical history or the change in the medical history. And I really think a great course for both your hygienists and your dental assistants would be a course in understanding red flags and medical histories that are given to you by the patient. And so I said documentation, just general What needs to be in the chart or in the computer that covers you and also represents you well to the next dentist who looks at this patient, if indeed that ever happens. And then their medical histories, and how's that relevant to the treatment they're going to get today. Notice that I'm not really speaking about things that increase productivity right this second. But I've always felt that when you do things right, it just happens. It does. Taking a few extra moments to do the things I'm talking about is not a good thing. There's no way you could argue this is a bad thing to do, even if it cuts into your productivity time. And then the third thing, certainly right along with that, would be an updated course, which are all over the place, for both hygiene team, both dental assistant team, and in pharmacology. Like what's relevant in dentistry today in the world of pharmacology? Who the heck can keep up on all those things? And you know, I'm a giant delegator. You've heard me say it before. Maybe it's my brain size can't handle any more information. I don't know. I think I speak for a lot of us when I say I am totally happy and content with my team taking courses, which they love to do anyway. And I think it's part of the reason my average employee is with me over 20 years. I know COVID in our face right now, but I really do believe it's going to start to ease up with the ability to start taking live courses again. And I said live in 2021. This is the stuff that you need to be investigating right now. Do you hear what I'm saying? I mean, I've been talking about this right now for what? 23 minutes. And what I'm saying to you is this is not the time to coast through 2020 and just, let me get it behind me. And then I'll take my couple-week break, which we all know that December and the first 2 weeks of January are kind of a blank storm anyway. Everybody's half on vacation in their mind. So when are you going to be compelled to get reorganized for this new year that's coming around? Just a breath away. This is the time right now. And it doesn't take that much time, but it does take time. So I would ask myself, if I was you, what are the things that could happen inside my office? This is a good question to ask. In 2021, that would make me more proud of the dentistry that we provide for our community. It would make me a better clinician and would make me happier. And they can be two different things. Having great documentation, I guess, would make you happier. I don't know if that's going to make you more fulfilled and likewise. But what about the skill sets that you presently provide? Is that making you happy? I think the number one thing that happens to a lot of my colleagues and myself as you keep practicing is the thrill or even the desire to do direct restorative dentistry can become laborious, arduous. And as you grow, one of the first things that comes to mind is, can I get an associate that can take some of this off me? So this is just a little caveat here. This is the way I've always hired an associate. This will sound interesting to you or strange. I would start scheduling them even before I had them. As soon as I started the interview process, 90 days out for a full day. And there's an old saying in motivational speaking called leap and the net will appear. And what that means is when you start to go into a direction, things happen to support that direction as long as your intentions are earnest. And on a lesser level, I would also do that with hygiene. So maybe you have one hygienist right now in your career, but you'd like and think you need a second. So that's exactly how I would do it. I would go out 90 days and I would inform my front desk to start scheduling a hygiene schedule for the next hygienist we have. Because the hiring process can take a month. And never in 40 years did I ever not hire that hygienist or the associate to take over that schedule that I started developing. What you don't want is a chaotic, oh my God, I have to fill the schedule. He or she is starting in 2 weeks. And it's amazing and very rewarding when you start to see the schedule start to be filled. Now, by the way, that would be for 1 day a week. And look, leap and a net will appear. If you look for someone, you're going to find someone somewhere in your community, I'm pretty sure, that's the perfect next thing they want, a 1 day a week job, because maybe they already have a job somewhere else that is satisfying to them. And once the hygienist would fill 1 day, we would start booking the second day. And before you know it, a year is over and they have a 4-day schedule. It's really how it happened for me. And that happened with goal setting, to be quite honest with you. You know, I'm looking at my time and I'm at 28 minutes, and I really feel like I don't want to shorten this concept that I'm talking to you about, the concept of you being prepared for 2021 by starting the process now in the first week of November of 2020. And I'm going to continue this exact conversation at the next podcast, taking it up further beyond maybe if you're out there as a young practice owner, that you're at the point, maybe you're not at the point where you're busy enough to even justify bringing an associate to help you take on procedures that you don't like. Maybe you hate doing dentures. Maybe you don't enjoy working on children. All very legitimate complaints in my world. But if you just continue, you don't do anything about it, and maybe, by the way, you try what I'm telling you, and it doesn't work out for whatever reason, at least you tried. Listen, this feels very on to me this week, and this is hard to come up with things that I really hope resonate and help my colleagues, which is what the Lionhearted Dentist is all about. I'll see you next week on the Lionhearted Dentist. Stay strong. Let's prepare right now to make 2021 our best year ever.